Hey, welcome to a quick video. During my last live stream, there was a question that came in just as the show was ending, and I thought I would cover it in a standalone video. And the comment was from Shell of a Crab. It says, DSD apologies if already covered. How do you deal with false memories that have been sewn into kids' minds? My 10-year-old recently told her cousin that I never fed her younger sister. Okay, so that's a good question. And part of the crazy making that this whole situation has you end up having to go through. The first question I would ask you is who is the cousin? Is it on your side of the family? Is it on your ex's side of the family? Where is this being said, and what's the context that it's being said in? For instance, if you heard about this through a cousin who was at a family gathering with the ex, or whatever, some type of, family gathering, but a visit or whatever, is it under the eye of the narcissistic toxic ex? Is the child, is your 10-year-old just repeating the same thing that the ex is telling everybody to spread a narrative? If that's the case, then your kid could be doing that in one of two things. It could be that they're just trying to demonstrate to the other parent that, hey, this is happening. Now, the other issue could be that the kid is saying this because they're going through their own cognitive dissonance and they don't know what's real anymore. And they're telling this story to someone else to see if they say, oh my God, that's horrible. How did your dad do that? Or that's not true, to try to get their own validation on what's going on. Bottom line is, you need to get your kid into therapy for this issue and give them an outlet to deal with it. I've said this a lot before, but this is really tough on kids. It's tough on us. Don't get me wrong. You and I are both going through an incredibly difficult experience, but it is a hell of a lot more complicated for kids. At least we have the cognitive ability, the years under our belt, so to speak, to be able to rationally, with some help, to see what's going on reality-wise and heal from it. A child is so much more complicated and complex because they're stuck. Until they turn 18, they can't just leave. So they have to deal with this situation and try to navigate it. This is why so often children will basically repeat or say what a toxic ex wants to hear. They'll hide information because they're trying to just survive this emotional nightmare. And unfortunately, a 10-year-old doesn't have the skill set, the maturity to be able to deal with this. It's really a tough situation. So the next thing I would ask you is, what's the context of the comment? So narcissists are really great at nitpicking details or cherry picking details to fill their narrative. So that's the other point of this. And what I'm saying by this is, a typical narcissistic type move would be, let's say in their mind, you were supposed to feed the child at 5 o'clock. And because of whatever reason, you were traveling or whatever, you went to a movie, you did something else, and you ate and you fed them at 7:30. Well, technically, they could say, well, you were, in their mind, you were supposed to feed them at 5 o'clock, and you didn't do that, so you didn't feed little Susie. Whereas in the broader context, you weren't able to do it at that particular time, and the reality is you fed them at 6 or you fed them at 7. But they will definitely cherry pick information to try to prove their point. For instance, an example, not quite the same. And this wasn't actually, I don't know if this was said to the kids. I didn't hear this, but I do know that in my situation, my ex said I refused to go to marriage counseling. I wanted to work on the marriage, but Duane wouldn't. He refused. He refused to go to marriage counseling. Now, is there some truth to that statement? Yes. But what's the context? The context is, we went to marriage counseling for about 3 months. It was a colossal disaster. We finally decided we were getting divorced and we were going to separate. And then her question was, are we still going to marriage counseling? I said, no, we've already done it. It hasn't worked. There's no reason to continue. Unless something has changed, there's no reason to continue. So in the context, what she's saying is a lie, but in the cherry picking of data, it's true. And they don't share that information. So you have to keep that in mind, excuse me, whenever you're going through this, to understand how it's being played and how it's being portrayed. Now, the fact that your child is in the midst of this and having to deal with this is horrible. Excuse me, and I apologize that you're dealing with that. But then this really rolls into the next thing I want to get to, and it's like, what are the kids saying around you? Meaning, what's your relationship with them? If going back to what I was talking about in the beginning, when I asked you, who the cousin was, if when they're with you, everything's fine, they're loving, they're trusting, they're affectionate, then you're doing okay. And now you could, in this situation, let's say, so it doesn't even matter which family member it is. Let's say hypothetically, the cousin's parent tells you, or somehow you hear this happen. You could sit down with little Susie and say, hey, Pumpkin, so what happened? I heard you told, Timmy that I didn't feed your little sister. What was that? What happened there? And, kids, especially 10-year-old, they start to understand what's going on a little bit. Well, I say they start to understand the dynamic, and they start to do things to protect themselves. But if you can say it in a non-threatening manner and you can have that conversation, and maybe they'll say, well, you were supposed, like I said, maybe they said, well, you were supposed to feed little Susie at 5 and you didn't, and they were hungry. And you could then say, well, yeah, you're right. We weren't able to do that because these are the situations, but as soon as we could feed them, that type of thing. Or maybe they'll say something like, well, Mommy says you never feed little Susie. I'm getting my names confused, so I apologize. But you understand what I'm saying? But you can have a conversation with that. And you could even say, hey, you got to be really careful what you say to people because, that's not really true. And you're telling people things that would cause them concern, thinking that I'm being neglectful or abusive to your little sister. And that's not really true. And you want people to be able to believe you. You don't want, the cry wolf syndrome. You might tell them that story. They probably already know it. And say, integrity and your word means a lot. Yeah, be really careful how you say that because that can easily turn into a negative or make them feel like they did something wrong, which, in all reality, they did. But you're playing a different game now because you have an ex that is playing these stupid mind games. So that is how I would deal with that. And again, I don't know how you feel about therapy. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it. But if you could find a good, I always say that I think a good therapist is good for children in this situation. I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me on this, but the problem is that our view is tainted, the other parent's view is tainted in the child's mind, and they don't know who to believe. They know that the parents are arch enemies. Typically what ends up happening is a narcissistic person is able to come across as more believable or have a story that is believed. And then the other person is couched in the one that's always talking bad and that's where you get in the trouble when you're trying to defend yourself, because if you do it incorrectly, it absolutely can look like you are, you're the one who's saying, look, this is wrong. Look, your other parent is doing this, this, and this. You just have to be really careful about that. Again, as I mentioned in the live stream, all of this stuff it's not overnight. It takes time. You have to slowly build on this and do it very incrementally and demonstrate the point that what you're saying is truthful and that it's coming from a place of love and the child feels secure in your environment. When they don't, things start going south. The relationship starts eroding. When I mentioned before about the test, generally is always, how are the kids with you? When the kids are withdrawn, unaffectionate, scared, they don't feel calm, those are all bad signs. And you'll start seeing that. And that's going to happen in the beginning no matter what, just because this is a very stressful experience for a child. But as you start approaching this in the way I was describing, you start to see things shift. You start to see them calm down. You start to see them relax in your environment and still be affectionate and still, be loving to you. That doesn't mean that the second that they run over to the other parent, that if you're around them right afterwards or at the same location, that they might be, clinging to the other parent and looking at you like, you're an axe murderer, and you feel like crap because you're like, what the hell? Why can't little Susie come over here and give me a hug? It's a different dynamic when you are alone. Now, if everything's great in those situations, they absolutely will run up to you and be affectionate to you in front of the ex. I would say typically for people who are at this channel, man to woman, if you're on the target side of this, that's not going to happen. Focus on how things are when you are with your child by themselves. That is really the indicator on how you are doing. So on that, hopefully that was helpful. If you have Shell of the Crab, if you have any other comments, leave them in a comment below, and I can either make another video or attach, answer it in the comments. Would like to know what other people think about this. If you had experience with this, if you had some success using the technique that I just mentioned in this video, or maybe you did something different and had some success, or maybe even you tried something different and it didn't work. I've made my share of mistakes on that. On that, I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.